I forgot my lower thirds.
Okay, who's moderating? Are we recording? We're live. I feel like an astronaut.
You kind of look like one.
Awesome. Okay, so we are discussing gamification, coding, and one-to-one rollout strategies. It looks like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of stuff.
That is a lot. We might need to pare that down.
So let's introduce ourselves first. Cindy, you're on the far left on my screen. You want to start?
Sure. I am Cindy Etherton, and I am I work with Salem Kaiser in an ed tech coordination role.
Jennifer?
Oh, I'm Jennifer Sapinski, and I'm at Tigard Tualatin School District and Instructional Technology Teacher on Special Assignment.
I'm Melissa Lim, and I am with Portland Public Schools, Education Technology.
And I'm Corinne Richards. I am the Administrator for Instructional Tech in Beaverton School District. And is my lower third on? Oh, yeah.
Yours is. I need to put mine on.
Just a little delay there. Okay, so I don't know what you guys were discussing as far as the notes go, but what I will do is make sure there's a blog post summarizing this. I know I used to do that, and then I kind of stopped doing it, and now I'm going to start doing it again. Because it's useful to have blog posts like, Jeff's here.
Jeff, just in time for we just went live.
All right.
Just for
Want to
you.
introduce yourself?
I'm Jeff. From Salem Kaiser, Jeff Kurtz, ladies and gentlemen.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are discussing gamification, coding, and one-to-one rollout strategies.
Jeez, I got on the wrong one. Holy smokes. All right.
Yeah, we thought you
Say
were.
that again.
Yeah, we
That was
thought
a
you were
lot.
leading the whole thing, Jeff.
Oh, shoot.
Welcome. We're lost without you.
Yeah, right.
I am lost without the notes, though. Okay, here we go.
Hey.
So, did we work up? I mean, let's just start to brainstorm. Let's do gamification first and
Yeah, let's focus
talk
on
about it for 10 minutes, and then.
Yeah, that sounds like a great strategy.
Okay. So, brainstorm. I am curious about gamification in a lot of ways. My first question.
There, first you get the question badge, Corinne.
There we go.
See, I was prepared. I got a whole system.
So my first question is, I think initially, like I think about when my daughter was little and she used to play games, like they were on CDs because that's when she grew up. But I noticed a lot of times and read a lot of studies that said that because you gamify, like they're learning concepts, say like math facts. But it doesn't really transfer very well, so a lot of the literacy that she was learning, there's a game that she played with math, for instance, with shapes, and every time she sat down to play the game, I had to explain to her, again, what a cylinder was, what a sphere is, all those kinds of things. So clearly there wasn't a lot of transfer going on. And I'm wondering if the new way that we're gamifying actually has proven to transfer.
So as
answering that right now, we can brainstorm a list, but that's sort of my
2
thoughts.
points for you.
well, Jeff, I think you bring up a good point in that, is gamification truly just all about points and badges and leaderboards and how we compare to each other and all of that? Or is it a whole lot more than that? So, I would probably argue that it is a lot more than that. It's about how do you motivate people to do what it is that they need to be able to do. But again, I think certainly those, the effective question badge and the 2 points that Corinne has earned has motivated me to want to make sure I'm asking good questions to get more points.
And to confirm that you are, 2 points.
Oh, yes.
You just won the engagement badge.
Well, and I think it's also important to understand what gamification is not, and it's because I know that when I say, I don't ever say gamification. I don't talk gamification with most teachers or parents. I stay away from talking about it with people who don't understand already. because I feel as soon as I say that word, people think games on iPads and just playing.
They get enough
Not,
time,
and
you know.
maybe educational games, but still not games that are really, it's like Corinne's daughter playing that game and never understanding, never learning the concept.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so I think that there's a misunderstanding among educators and non-educators as to what exactly is gamifying something.
Mm-hmm.
And
So can
it's-
Can
No,
you
go ahead.
start with a definition? Can we start with a definition that I can put on the notes?
yeah, that'd be good.
Okay, go. I'm not saying I have the
I
definition.
thought you had one, Karen. I was gonna say, but she had her personal educator there. She had her mom there. You know,
Well, that's
it
true.
was engagement. It was engaging her in asking certain questions that she might not have otherwise asked at home.
That's true.
So I guess as I think about gamification, I think, let's just take the Shapes game, Corinne, that you started with. Part of what comes with that is immediate feedback. You know exactly where you stand and how to improve. If I go 2 steps back and I know that the goal is to get to the end of the game board, then I know that I have to do things that enable me to go forward, not backwards. At the same time, there has to be some level of motivation. Maybe that's extrinsic, maybe that's intrinsic, but I have to be motivated to actually play the game at all. So, when we talk about education as being a learning game, in terms of you got to learn how to be a good student, I think that the ideas of gamification can be added very quickly. Is there immediate feedback? Do I know where I stand? Do I know how to move forward? Do I know how to improve? Do I know what the end of the game is? And then, how do I compare to other people? So again, sometimes that's an extrinsic motivator for some people. Maybe sometimes it's more internal. So it's a combination.
Have you guys read Jane McGonigal's book, Reality's Broken?
Yeah,
No.
No, I haven't read it, but I've listened
It's
to
a
Jane.
great book.
it's really
I don't know if
good.
you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I really liked it. And she spoke at ECPE a few years ago, and Cindy, a lot of what you just said resonates. It was super interesting. She did this talk because she was a game developer and actually used gaming to sort of get herself out of depression at one point in her life. Her TED Talk was quite good. Brilliant. It was really fun to see her speak. But it was super interesting because she spoke for probably, I don't know how long her keynote was, 30, 40 minutes about real gamification, and she's designed an online game that is very altruistic in more than one case, where the kids think up an authentic problem, or the person playing the game, not just kids, and then they actually turn it into a business.
Nice.
Or she designed a game where they played online in the New York Public Library, and then they actually held the game in the New York Library point. So they all gathered there, and so lots of cool, really authentic ideas. But that takes some serious creativity.
Right.
At the end of the 30-minute talk, there were people that raised their hands, all educators or IT folks in education. And they said, well, how do we get kids on games that we really want them to be playing, like the games that are good for them? Because they don't be very motivated. So when you're talking, Cindy, it's like, I have to be motivated to play the game in the first place. The games that we think are really valuable for kids, they should be playing, aren't really the ones that are most interesting.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a piece of gamification that we forget, and sometimes we forget in the classroom, is there has to be some kind of choice. So if I have an option of how I'm going to show you that I am proficient, and I get 3 choices, and I get to choose, wow, I might be more motivated to actually choose to tell you how proficient I am, rather than having to, you decide how I'm going to show you. And I think in general, students are more deliberate, but also more thorough in how they show that too.
Okay. So some student agency in terms of I get to pick the stage to tell you.
Definitely.
So, because I think some of those games are just drill and kill. Like how?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
drill
Yeah.
and kill masked as a game.
Right. Yeah.
And
Are you
going back-
motivated yet?
Going back to what Jennifer said about not using those terms, I mean, I think the risk is that you have educators that just want to try something and they try to gamify their instruction, and it's like they do the first part and they don't do it all the way.
Right.
Mhm.
And the same with the flipped classroom, like, oh, that's a great idea, I'm going to try it, and I'm going to make them do everything at home, and then we'll just come back to school and do whatever. And there's always the risk of that happening where it's not done with fidelity, I guess, or it's not intentional.
Mhm.
Well, and some of it I love. I mean, that's a good point, Melissa, because I think sometimes it's the same thing with any kind of technology or any idea, really. You shove it into a traditional system instead of
Right.
modifying the system,
Mhm.
sort of revisioning what it is going to look like, and then you're just feeding that broken system
Yep.
rather than redefining what you're doing. So are there facets, Cindy, that, like, I wrote down immediate feedback, initial motivation, and then student agency? What are some other, like, if we were to do this completely, what are the other facets that we'd have to be concerned with?
Well, again, I think motivation is a big piece of that. So, so when I think about, so for an example, I happen to gamify a course with students, and one of the things that I did is I said, if you meet this level of proficiency, so the course was completely standards-based and proficiency-based, and so I said, if you meet this level of proficiency by X date, and that was basically when I would be expecting them to have that level of understanding, then you get access to the secret folder that nobody else does. So there's that extra of, oh, hey, you know what, I can do that. And so what I was finding is that people were showing the basic proficiency but also advanced proficiency because they wanted to get to that folder. They weren't saying, yeah, never mind, I'm going to show you some really intermediate or less than skills because I want that folder. They had to show, the only way they could get into that was to show that basic or advanced mastery.
Yeah, it's that whole idea of leveling up. It's continually like working for that level.
Exactly.
Not being happy with the beginner. You have to continue to try and work harder to level up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think if we were to really talk about it in that, with those terms, with people who weren't real comfortable with the idea of gamifying things, if we were to say, I'm going to make my classroom is going to be all about leveling up, instead of my classroom is all about gamification. It just using those different terms immediately, I think, gets the brain thinking, okay, we're working harder. We're gonna try and continue to move beyond proficient. Proficient's good, but we want to level up, and just using those words, I think, makes a huge difference.
Yeah, you know, Jennifer, I think that's really interesting in that when you're using common terms that are universally understood, but they're not buzzwords yet, and so I think it has some weight and some power as a result.
So I also have a question about, I mean, I haven't ever seen a lot of people do this really well. And so I put a link in the notes to this school in New York City that was designed by game designers or whatever. And I mean, like Jane McGonigal, she created this app and this website called Super Better, which I think Corinne was talking about. And it's basically, she created it when she was going through this depression because she had these health issues and she couldn't run, I think was the issue. And so, like, after I heard her talk, I had gone to the site and signed up and started doing all the stuff but then it got sort of boring. So at what point how do you keep this going so it's not boring because it's just the same thing over and over again?
Yeah, and the second part of that question would be, I feel like what Cindy's talking about is you want to motivate people to play it. There's some challenges that they need to meet in order to get maybe more information. But it's almost like you don't want to challenge them too much, because then you lose motivation to play the game because it's too hard.
Exactly.
So what's the balance?
Yeah.
For both those.
Well, isn't that education in general?
That's true.
How do we move forward?
But it's support. I mean, with education, right, it's my job to push my kids outside. If they're not feeling just a little bit of discomfort, they're not really learning. They're not doing that hard work. But it's the I'm there to support them. But I don't know if in a gaming situation, like, you'd almost have to modify for every kid. You know, because there's no human factor. Or is there a human factor?
Well, I think that the human factor is the most important part of gamifying either a part of the classroom or a unit or anything. It's the human factor, because you've got the engagement, the intrinsic motivation, and the engagement is the human piece of it. And not everybody's is motivated by the same thing, for sure. But I feel like the human piece, the teacher piece, it's the teacher's role to engage every student. And if you're using that gamifying strategy to make sure that it is going to reach every student, and it's not going to be necessarily a device that's going to do that. And I know for me, I have never been into video games of any kind. I mean, every once in a while I try. I used to like Burger Time, when I see that, I still like it. But that doesn't motivate me. I get bored with it very easily.
Well, and I would say that that's another element of gamification is the community, because sometimes it's all about who you're with that motivates you to continue.
Yeah.
And so, that's an element to make sure to be included.
That's a very important part, because I know for me, just thinking personally, I don't get motivated by games on an iPad, but if I was with a group of people that were super fun and I wanted to play with them and engage with them, then I would play the game and I would have fun with it, because it's the community.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I wanted to make sure that I share with you guys, because I think it's an interesting concept. So Lynn Benton Community College is gamifying a whole wing of their online instruction. And so people will receive certifications as they go through these gamified courses. So it's called LB, I Learn, and I'll connect a link to the notes. And the idea is any student can start on any Wednesday. It has a rolling enrollment, and within that enrollment, if I decided I want to start this Wednesday, and Jennifer, you decide to start next Wednesday, we both get to go through the course however fast we want, but we have to be at a very specific pace also. So in other words, I can't go too slow, but I can go as fast as I need to. And this is all around this particular certification course. There's 4 parts, is around marketing. So how to use social media to market, and it kind of progresses from there. So it's a really interesting concept. I don't know that there's any local groups that are doing anything even similar, remotely similar to that.
Wow, that sounds interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's marketing right now. Do you know what else they're going to be doing?
So this is a federal grant that they're developing, using funds to develop the program, and so they're wanting to do it well, so they're kind of keeping it fairly small, and they're going to build out from there. So, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, again, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
Very cool. Okay, so we're at about 10 minutes. Should we switch to coding and then do 10 on one-to-one?
Sure. Do you guys have any other questions, thoughts on gamification?
I would love to actually see an effective classroom that is gamified and doing it well. I know that there are 2 teachers from our one-to-one school went to a gamification workshop at Integrated this past time, and they were super on fire about it. And so they are gamifying their classrooms, and I haven't had a chance to go in and take a look and see what they're doing. But it's all about the leveling up. And but if anybody had any other classrooms that they knew were doing it well, that might be kind of cool to at least get on their website and see if there's anything. The 2 teachers that I know that are doing it, actually, I just looked at their websites, and there's nothing about it on their websites.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean they're not doing it well. It just means they're not promoting it that way.
So do you think that gamification is really about getting the individual to motivate themselves through the process? Because if it's just about motivation, then we've been doing it with pizza parties and all sorts of stuff since since I can remember.
Yeah.
And that was motivating. You do all of your math worksheets and you get a pizza party for the class. Once everybody gets a star on the board. And, so we've been doing it, but is it about the individual going through a process and being motivated to go through that on their own with agency on their own to go to the next level?
Well, I would say that it is a little bit of all of that. So yeah, it's that individual motivation. It's also the opportunity to collaboratively learn, but also a level of expectation as to what it is that I'm achieving, and that everybody knows that I achieved that level based on where I am. So again, Monopoly is a great example. We can all own property, but it's the value of the property that helps you do better in the game. So I can do 3 worksheets, math worksheets, but if Melissa does 1 and it's much more difficult than the 3 I did, then her level of expertise is going to be stronger.
Yeah. So. When I think about games and what we like about them, they have nothing to do with reality, but it's all this trying to make connections to reality through the game is the interesting part of this. But I don't, when I sit down to try and think about how to do it, I can't really come up with a clear. You have to develop a parallel reality to link it to the real, the learning, the actual learning, get them through. It just seems like it's to be interesting and to be really compelling. It would be an amazing amount of creative effort. Not that it couldn't be done, but it doesn't. There's no clear connections to creating a gamified atmosphere that would be effective and replicable. In like, let's say, across the school, for instance.
And I would think that creativity would have to sort of live on. It might be exhausting to a certain point, to a certain extent, just because you'd have to come up with it, and then you'd have to somehow keep it going.
Yeah, I could see maybe gamifying 1 unit a year or something like. Yeah. Every year it's legendary. The new class looks forward to it, because I can see that. I think I have seen that, but I haven't seen a whole class environment that's just gamified.
Well, this isn't probably the environment to make it super public, but I'd be happy to share. It's a fairly traditional classroom environment, but again, the whole thing was gamified. It was through online tutorials, and then I was there as support. So sort of that flipped classroom gamification option. So, again, I'd be happy to share that. If that helps see that, because again, it's doable and it wasn't that much work. It was just being thoughtful about what was being done. So
when you say traditional classroom, what do you mean? Because that doesn't sound traditional to me.
So I guess what I mean is that the content wasn't super original and creative, but all the elements that we've been talking about was involved. So there was an element of choice. There was an element of feedback, comparison. Students could receive badges, that others could be seen, and that was all within Schoology. So Schoology isn't anything, it's full functioning, but again, it wasn't a above and beyond kind of environment. There are some environments where you can actually have students play a video game and then they learn the content as they literally move through the levels. So, anyway. So. Well,
I
guys,
like. Okay.
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say the one gamification environment that comes to mind that I really like is the new Khan Academy Mission Math. I don't know if it's the most highly engaging game, but there at least is as you go through the different levels, there's at least something that helps you progress because you can get to the next badge or the next level, and you can block off more skills. So you start to fill in this dark blue array of skills. And so there's something motivating about that. If you've got to do the math anyway, that's a more fun way to do it. So that's something that I've been seeing people really get excited about. But as far as anything else I could recommend, I don't have any. Does anybody have any recommendations of other things that, like just individual pieces that we could use or the teachers could use?
No.
No.
Well versed in this at all.
So
Sundog
I
is
can.
one that my kids like at their school, but I don't know. I don't know much about it. I know there's a game element to it where they can build.
Yeah, so I can add some stuff into our notes, and there's lots of really good resources out there.
Yeah, that
There
would be
is something that Jane, I think it was mentioned in Jane McGonigal's book, or she mentioned in her talk, but for home, there's something called Chore Wars. Have you heard of that?
great. I have heard of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's basically
think I might
making a
have- you might have
game
told
out
me
of
about it.
housework.
Yeah. Sounds awesome.
I wonder if my dogs would play that. Probably.
I know that would not motivate my children at all.
By that?
No, my children wouldn't be motivated by that at all. They're teenagers. They're too good for that. I'm being recorded, aren't I?
We always did that with roommates, but it was a chalkboard of like who did the dishes, and then we just used hashtags, or I mean hashes to mark them.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, somebody would go up there and put like 20 by their name. Cheater. That's fun. You'd be able to cheat in the gamification of
Yeah.
chores in particular. Okay, should we move on to coding?
Sure.
Cindy's going to provide us with all kinds of links. Okay, I don't know why we lumped coding in here with gamification and one-to-one, but I guess they...
Well, do we save coding for another time?
And one-to-one for
and
another
do
time.
one-to-one for another time. We could do that.
Well, it certainly is. I mean, I think we've talked about, have we talked about coding before?
I don't think as a full-on topic.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we could spend 10 minutes. I mean, it wouldn't be hard to spend 10 minutes on coding for sure. But maybe save one-to-one for
Yeah.
the next
The
one.
one-to-one's bigger.
So we just talked about, well, you know, now in England, every student's leaving K-12 with some kind of coding experience. So that's actually, there's like legislation around it, which I found kind of fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
But
There's a state
now-
as well.
Which one?
I want to say, well, Susan Bernard texted me when she read the article, so I'm looking. I want to say Indiana high school.
That does sound familiar. It's one of
Yeah.
the states.
It's an I state.
I was
Ooh,
ahead of its time.
listen to that. It's an I state. Get it? Information. I.
So I noticed that there's a lot more controversy around coding than there has been recently. So you know it's been around in K-12 long enough so that when someone loops back around and says, no, it's not that good for kids.
Yeah, right.
Okay, now it's been around long enough so we can have a real conversation about it.
An argument.
Yeah, so the argument is that you have to directly tie to the math and science concepts because kids don't make that tie, so it's kind of like a simulation in that. It's really cool and fun, and I'm doing this task right now, and I might be using resources in my classroom and other people and, finding mistakes in some cases behind the task, but they don't make that tie to I'm moving this piece around spatially. That also applies to math in different ways, or when I solve a puzzle or whatever. So that's the most recent one that I've read that makes it controversial.
But just the act of having to learn that there is this language that correlates with actions that we can, that we can actually build something out of. It's just the process of doing that lays a foundation for them to be able to understand how things work a little bit more. It might not be, tremendously relative to what they're doing right now, or it might not be directly correlative to what they actually might do if they get into computer science and coding and more programming in general. But I think it's a good foundational piece. It's like, everybody takes Spanish 101. Not everybody, but a lot of people take just that introductory level Spanish to get an exposure to the language, which lays a foundation for a lot of communication that takes place in their life. Yeah. But they don't go on to become an expert and fluent in Spanish, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But I think there are some. Go ahead.
Well, I think that's what, I don't know if anyone found the state legislation around it, but I think that's what they were kind of proposing. And in England was, we just have to give them some exposure to this stuff because it really does apply to their lives. But they're not going to all learn, Python in depth. Like, that's really not the goal.
Right.
I just found it Arkansas. It's not an I.
E-state.
Yeah, in Arkansas. Arkansas is now the first state to require that high schools teach coding. So it's not requiring that all students take coding, but it's requiring, so let's see, Arkansas will be implementing a new law that requires public high schools to offer classes in computer science starting in the 15-16 school year. That just says computer science. I don't know if that's, but the highlight part is coding. Yeah, so the students are going to be not required to take it, but it's just the goal is to give everybody the opportunity to take it.
Can you put that in the notes?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, I remember people, when I was a high school student, computer science or computers meant that you did your keyboarding, you did typing on the computer, but it didn't necessarily, there wasn't anything else to it.
Yeah.
I learned,
you could word process.
Basic coding when I was like 11. We had a donation of a computer and then a family matched it. So my 6th grade classroom had 2 computers in it. And that's what they taught us to do. We had these games on 5 1/4 inch floppies. And it was like pre-Oregon Trail or anything. But I do remember that I loved coding. I mean, like the trial and error of that was really, really interesting to me. And later on, when I trained teachers on interfaces, like in the mid-90s, it really did help me. Those if-then statements, I knew how an interface worked because I knew what was behind it.
Yeah.
And so everyone else thought it was just magic, and I went, oh no, really? When you click here, there's code behind it that tells the computer that when the user clicks here, or if the user clicks here, then this is what you're going to do.
That really is important. Like, you can't just think that everything that happens on here is magic. Like,
I know.
It has to be something that somebody creates. It happens somehow. It isn't just magic.
Well, and as a result, you can definitely, like, how a virus is written, and how a virus propagates, and you can kind of prevent that from happening, which is how it starts to apply to our kids. Not that all the evil stuff that's out there is more important, but I think it helps them start to, when a web page isn't loading, or is it the browser, is it the page itself?
Right.
You can kind of start to go, well, because I see that this is working, I know that this isn't the issue. Mm-hmm. So I think help desk people would appreciate this a lot more when we called it. We actually had thought a little more deeply about what was happening with whatever our problem is. So I think there's a lot of value to it, but I do see how you might have to draw those conclusions with and for kids more than just raw code.
There's no I don't think there's a real demand though. There's no outcry from any group asking for coding. I don't see it becoming part of what we do right now in our school district anyway, because there's no pain point around not having coding in the schools right now. There's no parent group who's saying we need it. There's no industry who's saying, come on, you got to be teaching your kids code. There's nobody pushing it. And
yeah,
we
have Intel parents that are pushing it here.
Yeah, I can imagine you might.
But, yeah, I don't know that you would in Salem. What about Portland? Do you guys have people saying you need to be doing this?
There are some parents. So one of the schools that got one of the code.org, I think a $10,000 grant, it was mainly due to a parent that was pushing for that. And so they actually did Hour of Code with their entire school, not just some classes. Mm-hmm. So I'd say it's probably parents more. We only have one computer science class in the entire district at Wilson High School. So I know that teacher is trying to offer more stuff. It's hard though because I think a lot of his offerings are during the day. So it's like a full day thing that you would have to do. So I've been trying to work with him to try to schedule something, but it's a little hard because we don't have a budget to pay for teachers to do that. So it's really teachers using their own professional development funds.
And so the choice is there for teachers, but
yeah,
getting them to exercise it is.
Right.
Jennifer, do you have a lot of Intel people?
We have some, and there are parents that are definitely pushing for coding, and there's after-school programs that have been started to teach kids coding. There's, gosh, I can't remember the name of it. There's a program that has that offers enrichment classes, and one of the enrichment classes is coding. And then at one of the elementary schools, they're doing a STEM program, after-school program that's around coding. And then I know at our high schools, there are computer science type classes, and I don't think they're entirely coding, but there's some coding that's involved in some part of it, I think, but not big. It's really a parent. It's a push by parents and a push by just reading. You know, STEM is huge right now, and so lumping in coding with STEM is really big. And I know as far as teaching it during the day in a class that's not an elective, it needs to be connected directly to standards before it's going to get done.
Yeah, I know that's been our problem. We have a ton of different types of coding going on. A lot of our kids are using code.org and doing robotics, programming robotics and things like that. And there's a gap in our middle schools in terms of just offerings. And then we pick it back up in high school, and the complaint in high school is we're not getting it in middle school, so people aren't, they're saying the kids aren't motivated to take RCS classes, but they're full, really full, like overly full. They don't have enough machines. So I don't think that's the case as much as exactly what you're saying in terms of that that sort of connection. It has to be linked to standards, and then we have this Carnegie unit issue. So you offer a CS class, and you have to decide. I mean, we've talked about this ad nauseum. I feel like trying to offer certain math credits and science credits for coding classes, you'd have to figure out how much seat time is being spent on algebra
right.
to actually be able to offer algebra credit. Because we don't offer computer. It's an elective. It's
right.
really hard to make that tie. So until that broken system of education, one of which is that if you don't have a butt in a seat somewhere, then we're not awarding you credit. You know, it's 50 years old, 60 years old since the beginning of public education. We can't seem to break that mold. But I think CTE has it right. There are lots of CTE classes around the state that are offering different types of credit for auto mechanics and wood shop and things like that. We just have to get it right as a system. So we're running into problems with that because we want to offer a lot more and a lot more variety and tie it more into math and science, but we're having a pretty rough go of it right now. So I don't know how to fix that.
When you figure it out, let us know. We'll put it in the notes.
Dang it! Doggone it. I mean, yeah, it's just an interesting kind of battle. It's not my hill to die on right now, so maybe someday. Okay, so should we move on for a few minutes to one-to-one? I'm curious what's going on in your districts, or we can save it for next time.
I might have news next time.
Something's brewing, huh?
You might.
Oh, something's brewing.
I know we just released our Full Schools application, so Full School Digital Conversion, which eventually means one-to-one, but I couldn't live with it. We're just going to shove technology into classrooms, so an application process, and then I stretched it out to 5 years. So you apply, you get this future-ready status, and then we all work.
Oh, wow.
District-wide to do the planning process and the communication process within each building.
So tell us more about that. Details.
So for 2 years we've been planning. We called it digital conversion, sort of a smaller committee of central office folks, and then we expanded it last year, the year before, to include some other like building principals and some licensed staff. And what that's turned out to be, we shifted the languaging from digital conversion because we passed a bond that is about $7 million a year for technology. And we switched to future ready because that relates to the federal work that's going on around this. Mm-hmm. And the digital conversion languaging was really just to get the bond passed because you could enter it into a search engine and it made sense to people. Like they understood what that meant. So long term, the goal in Beaverton is that each kid will be invited to bring in a personal learning device. They have one at home. If they have a family that's unwilling or unable to provide a device, then the district will supplement and supplant that. So kid picks an iPad, district provides it, or the family provides it. We are, in the meantime, training teachers to make sure that they can deliver content to multiple devices. There are parameters around these devices. Of course, nobody's bringing a PlayStation in or their, Connect or whatever. So these full school, we've done a number of things. We did innovation grants. This year we're doing some content area conversions. So physics classrooms all over the district, 9-12, are getting iPads next year to replace some old technology and to enhance some instructional shifts that they're seeing. And then this third movement, in terms of getting the entire district future ready, is what we're calling full school movements. So the application is largely planning initially. So they have to have it done in the next couple of months. And it's led by principals, but there are teams in each building. And the facets are that they have a long-term plan for staff development, a long-term plan for communication to community parents and students. So that message is different. The idea is it'll be different. So they're all fed by documentation that we have centrally from pilots and from other districts. So staff development plan, technology use tied to core content areas. They set some goals, measurable goals, and then look at strategies around those goals, and then kind of verify that technology actually enhances that. So some of that's classroom management, some of it is student achievement, and these instructional shifts we're talking about as we move to digital materials. So those three facets are the biggest thing, and after there's a panel that will read or watch those, they can deliver it in any format they want. And then once they're deemed, we're only looking for 6 schools right now. We just did 8 to 10% of our system with phases for 5 years. So we did 8 to 10% the first year, so we're looking for 6 schools. And then for the next 3 years, we're doing sort of a critical mass. We're looking for 15 schools each year, or 15 programs. And then we figured the last 10 to 15%, which is about the portion of your organization that kind of dig in their heels. They're those teachers that you knew in your buildings that were like, no, I'm not doing this. I'll never do it. I think this is a silly movement. And that's just change management. It doesn't matter if it's technology or anything else. So 10 to 15% at the end, where the whole system will have essentially made that conversion, or they're well on their way to that conversion. And so we can feed those last folks with documentation, with lots of data about instructional shift, and then give them all kinds of people support too. So that's kind of how we've designed the system. And like I said, even if they jump in this year, they're going to take about 5 years to really fully get to that BYOD, district supplemented and supplanted technology use. So it's a huge amount of planning for them. It's a huge amount of staff development for them, and support for the team, support for administration, all kinds of things. They get some FTE with it, and then there's a little bit in the general fund for different types of staff development. So,
is all that work being driven by your superintendent?
The directive came from the superintendent. It's been a small team. Like I said, the team is growing, but it's been a small team out of IT and teaching and learning. We had a grant a few years ago.
That's impressive.
For transformation. Yeah, it's a lofty goal. So we'll see. I think our superintendent, honestly, this is being recorded, so I'm just gonna go out on the limb and say, I think he did this in Canby. Well, it was set up for him in Canby, and he kind of walked.
Okay.
And so I think what's interesting about this is some of it's been scalable and some of it hasn't. So as we look at Forsyth County and we look at Houston Public and even LA Unified and sort of that debacle, I was really glad they did it the way they did, because we found out how not to do it in lots of cases. And now there are lawsuits and all kinds of things. But I think that there are parts of this that work in a large district and parts that we just have said there's no way, even in our pilot schools. Jumping to BYOD, like one has in particular, they started with iPads 1-to-1 and then realized that they were creating and content and delivery for just iPads, and they knew that wasn't, they wanted to create it the way they thought kids needed it, and that there wasn't one device that was going to solve all of the problems. So they moved to BYOD, but they asked every single family. They had them in, they trained them to start and maintain an iTunes account.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, there's no way we could do, I can't scale that for the whole district. There's no way. So it's that kind of thing that we looked at it and said, well, it really worked for in a small environment, and in some of our schools it'll be fine. But to make that a reality for every single kid in our district, every single family, there's no way.
Yeah.
So so that's just one example of kind of what we've looked at that makes sense versus what we're going to have to shift and change in terms of expectations. So it's been an interesting process, but.
Well, I think our district, we're only really having introductory conversations about it. It's not nearly anything like that at all. So you get the master badge or whatever.
Yeah.
Hey, I got the badges here.
Well, it'll be interesting. Jennifer, I think we had conversations about this initial, like when we first started doing these talks, right? We talked about BYOD.
Right.
Talked a little bit about, full-scale deployments, or what you take in a district of 11,000 or 15,000 and 17,000, and what that threshold is as far as what's really, what do you really need to make it big, huge?
Right.
So certainly that work's been informed. And I took largely our innovation grants that we call positive change grants. I took Salem Kaiser stuff. I took Tigard Walsh, and I took Hillsborough, and I took PPS. So I think that, broadly, you guys are having these conversations, but we're all having these conversations. So sort of a conglomeration of work that has been nice to have, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Jennifer, you have in TTSD, you have one school, right?
We have one school that's all 1-to-1, one elementary school this year. They went 1-to-1 with iPads that we provided. And the idea was that at least, I think 4th and 5th grade would be taking them home. And we do have some 4th and 5th graders that are checking them out to take them home, but not all. I don't think that all parents want their kids taking them home. Mm-hmm. And I think that, it feels like that school, it's been largely successful, and it was a school that had the least amount of access to technology in our district as far as elementary schools go. And they were almost 100% on board, the staff and administrator. And we have Jillian, their full-time technology coach, to help them with implementation, tons of professional development, one person in one elementary school, and that's her role, and she's great at it. And so they have so much support, and I think that's the key to doing it that way. As I'm listening to you talk, Corinne, I'm like, oh, God, that's amazing. The visioning that you've gone through, that whole process is, I'm just salivating at that. And we just don't, we have just a very different culture, very, very different culture. And I feel like that it worked to do, as far as the elementary level, that it works this way. Because you've got teachers who are willing and wanting professional development and understanding that they need professional development to make it work. And they also understand that it's going to take a while. It's not an immediate change. It gets more difficult and convoluted as you get to the larger schools, so middle school and high school. It's not as clear cut. We are finding it is so not. So opposite of easy and clear cut. So that's what I might have to be able to talk about more next time. We have a meeting with some middle school teachers tomorrow morning to kind of hash out some questions. And we had hoped to have a process already going. We do have a process going, but long story, it's not. More later.
I'm excited to hear about it. Really. I don't know. It's an interesting.
We have a vision to go, one-to-one as a whole district, and it's our vision. Absolutely, I can say firmly and comfortably is that it's a student device. We're no longer replacing labs, except for. There's always exceptions. So there's going to be specialty labs that we are replacing out of district monies, but it's the student device that is being replaced now. And not putting a lab in a classroom, a mobile lab in a classroom. There's no more of that moving forward. We're moving away from that, and I feel really good about that. And I can stand behind that because it's about the students. It's not about the teacher. And it's hard to communicate that with teachers, but they're getting it, I think, and most of them, I think, get that and stand behind it.
Cool. It's nice to have an initiative that you're like, yes, I know this is good for students.
Yeah, and I feel like it's clear, and I don't have to say it's it's an iPad or it's a Chromebook. I'm not saying that, and I wouldn't feel good saying that, but it's a device that a student has access to whenever they need it, at home and at school, and there's plenty of times when you don't need it. And that's when they put it away.
Yep, I feel like we work in a system that is often about adults. So
Yeah.
That resonates.
Yeah.
If kids need tools, we're going to provide them.
Right.
The bottom line. That's cool. Good.
I was just an aside. I was in a 4th grade class before we started, and the kids were talking about they're doing measurement, and they needed their rulers. Well, they don't take the rulers out of the classroom with them. Some of the kids have rulers in their backpacks, and others don't have their rulers, so they have to borrow the teacher's rulers. But it's the same thing. You're not going to teach a measurement unit and not provide the ruler. Either they have it from home or they have it in the classroom. And there are concerns about how you use the ruler properly. It's not a sword. It's not something you eat your food with. But it's the same kind of thing,
I beg to differ.
You would.
Yeah, hit your neighbor with it.
Yeah.
So any movement in Salem-Keizer in terms of one-to-one or thoughts, visioning?
Yes.
So, Jeff, do you want to go ahead and start?
No, you go ahead. I'm a little embarrassed, though, about how little we have going, but we do have things going, and it's exciting to see some things moving forward. And Cindy coming in and taking on the finally the Google Chromebook rollout in our district, and that's happened lightning fast. So I think she should share about it.
Well, I think that it's an awful lot of hard work by teachers and what they're trying to accomplish with students, and a receptivity to doing some things a little differently than maybe was previously an option. So again, I would credit an awful lot of teachers in that process.
Yeah, for sure.
So I guess the other piece is within Salem-Keizer, we have a lot of high-level brand new leadership, or leadership that is now figuring out how to work with each other because in determining ideologies and whatnot. And I think that's a great place to be because we start out with some really intentional direction. And so with that said, I am foreseeing a lot of really positive movement as it comes to putting that student learning first. And so I'm excited to see what that means as we move forward. Of course, you know, we've got a high school that's largely one-to-one. We have a CTE high school that's just opening in the fall. There's going to be an awful lot of intentional tech integration within that that high school, and of course all of our one-to-ones that we've been kind of supporting all year long, those are continuing. So again, I think it's just a lot of positive movement as we move forward. Jeff, is there anything you'd add to that?
No, just to clarify, the one high school that we have that is one-to-one is an iPad one-to-one, and the students do take them home and they bring them to school and they take them to all their classes with them. The other one-to-ones that we have are individual classrooms, so we have a one-to-one, we have two one-to-ones that are iPad classrooms at the high school level. We have a one-to-one in 4th grade with Chromebooks that we're excited to see, because I think that's our lowest grade level one-to-one anywhere in the district, is that 4th grade classroom. So we're excited to see what that teacher can do and what we learn from him and those students. And then we have a one-to-one in a science environment, in a science classroom using Google Chromebooks. So we got.
Jeff, we have an iPad one-to-one at that same school as well, just so you know.
Oh, at Stevens.
Okay. Yeah.
How long has the high school been one-to-one?
2 years. Wait, maybe 3. 2 years for sure.
Yeah, at least that.
Yeah. And I think that's been a very effective tool for them. I don't know if they did it over today, if they would buy iPads or not. There are conversations I'd like to have, and things I'd still like to learn from them on how things are going. But and they're kind of one of our alternative high school environments. It's like it's a program where students have a little more agency over how they progress through the program, and they can even graduate early and things like that. So it's a little different environment.
I feel like that reflection piece for districts is something that we often forget. You guys are doing a good job in TTSD, but it's that I would follow up and say, would you buy iPads again? Or, you know, what are the pitfalls? Everything from, it's that soup to nuts. Like, what's held up in terms of hardware? What did you write into policy? How have they held up? How has your delivery changed? How has achievements different?
Yeah, we have a feedback listening session kind of thing coming up with our elementary school that's one-to-one. So we're going to go to a staff meeting in May, and we've got 3 questions, just kind of feedback. Tell us what's going good. What would you recommend to other schools, and that kind of thing.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
So we could probably discuss this again after.
Yeah.
Because our grants were tied directly to student achievement in terms of some core content area. It took us like 3/4 of the year to just get them to realize that this technology isn't going to make the difference. When they implement some innovative strategies that we can replicate across content areas and across the district, that's the big stuff. Because just because you shove a piece of technology in their hands doesn't mean that they're learning any better or effectively. And sometimes it's bad. If your classroom management wasn't great before, then
it may not be improved.
You're not getting any better.
So, Corinne, when do you get information back from those grants?
Well, we've had 3 data points over the year, so our final data point is going to come as close to the end of the year as we possibly can. That's just going to help us. The grants are really based on, well, it was our dipstick. I mean, kind of barometer feel for what was what they thought of as innovation in the district, because everyone on our team is relatively new to this. So they proposed some instructional innovative strategies. So we want kids to own their own learning. We're going to start this process early on, and then the technology is going to come in. So the first data point was the beginning, before they had the technology, and they were just teaching the strategies and then how the technology actually enhances that. So if you use Nearpod and kids have set their own academic goals and you're giving them formative feedback, then does that actually improve achievement, or does it, so it's not really about having Nearpod, it's really about kids owning their own learning, setting their own goals, and then getting consistent feedback in, and revamping their goal and their own their strategies in terms of their own metacognition. So anyway, it'll be interesting. Anyway, we're about to kind of collect that last bit of data and assess it. But I think the stories coming out of this are super cool, because it'll be a high school teacher. I don't know if I shared this, but most recently I got a call from someone who said, well, this was really an initiative about collaborative writing. It was something I knew that I wanted to do, kids blogging outside of class. And she said, she's a social studies and literature teacher, and she said it broke down social barriers in my classroom, and I went, what? Wow. And she said they're having richer conversations in class discussions during face-to-face time, because they've already interacted online. It was, they had a lot of agency in what they wrote and what they wrote about, but it was, on certain current events. And so as a result, when they came to class, they'd already interacted with each other online, sort of faceless, not nameless, but, they just kind of broke down any barriers they would have had socially. So that their classroom discussions were richer because they'd already discussed the content a little bit. It didn't matter who was in the room. So that was cool. I love that kind of at that point I don't care anything about writing data. I care all about the fact that they're interacting in really positive ways. So anyway, they're coming, so we can talk about this again in June at some point maybe.
Yeah, cool.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, you guys.
All right. So we next